Good morning. My watch says 8:15, and we want to honor that you all are here on time, so we're going to go ahead and start. I'm sure it'll fill in as people come. My name is Tina Jordan. I'm the Vice President of Membership for AFCEA International, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's panel. For those of you who might not be aware or are new to AFCEA, the Young AFCEAN program offers professionals 40 years old and under opportunities to lead, learn, and give back to their community. It also includes the opportunity to work with others who will become future leaders in industry, military, government, and academia. AFCEA is thrilled to provide this panel to you today. The folks on my right are not here because they are young AFCEANs. They're here because they are experts in their field and because of what they've accomplished. They just happen to have done so under the age of 40. So now I would like to introduce Hayden Hobeck, an emerging leader at Walker & Associates. Hayden will introduce the moderator of our panel, so please join me in a warm AFCEA welcome for Hayden Hobeck.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, as I'm looking forward to hearing these panelists' thoughts on what is being done and what can be done more efficiently for data science. I'm especially pleased to introduce the moderator of this Young AFCEAN panel, Clinton Austin, a U.S. Air Force veteran and member of the Young AFCEAN Executive Committee. Clinton brings over 19 years of collaborative information technology expertise. Previously, Clinton was a data architect for the United States Special Operations Command, where he ushered efforts to implement a big data strategy, in which he did by leading in-depth technology discussions, articulating the business value of system design and how the data will flow through stages. Clinton's current role is with Jacobs as a business development principal. Today, Clinton is joined by Jacquie Fleming, who is a full-stack developer and is part of this year's 40 and 40 award winner. Sean Black, a director of IT security and a current 40 under 40 winner. Nick Chadwick, a cloud architect and a 40 under 40 winner also. Marcus Neal, an enterprise architect and was part of previous year's 40 under 40 winner. And then Jevon Pinard, a storage architect, and then finally, Dr. Danny Sava, an IT director and business analyst. Thank you to the entire panel for being with us here today. We are looking forward to this valuable discussion. Thank you.
Just one correction. So Miss Jacquie McKinney, make sure that she comes out to future panels. I want to do a quick correction. Good morning. My name is Clinton Austin. As you go to these tech nets or you go to the Microsoft Ignites or the AWSs of the world, the reoccurring theme is the need for data science. Every conference that you'll go to is talking about AI, talking about machine learning, and how does data strategy or data science is going to be able to improve your organization. The purpose of this talk this morning is to kind of pull back some of the sheets a little bit and actually get down to I talk with my hands, so I have to back up a little bit so y'all can hear me, right? And so to be able to kind of pull back the covers and actually get to what the root cause of what data science is. We're going to be looking at it from what are the key personnel that you already have on staff that can help and enable your data science strategy. We're also going to be discussing what it is. And what you as senior leaders out here in the audience, what do you need to do to be able to enable that data-driven strategy? So I'll start off with some of the questions, and I'll start with Mr. Sean Black, and I'll go ahead and just work down to the right. To help the audience understand the different roles within the data science landscape, can you tell me a little bit about what you do for your organization?
Absolutely. So as a director of cybersecurity, I have kind of two different aspects to data science. One is that we leverage data science in order to defend the network, whether that be endpoints, applications, the infrastructure. And so we're heavy users, and that's kind of the full gamut of data science, everything from analytics, more of the visualization layer, to then maturing into the ML and AI landscape. On the flip side, we're also the people that are responsible for defending, right, many of those core systems that house that data, that corpus that's leveraged, as well as the systems that will eventually have those algorithms, especially ones that are custom and proprietary to the DoD and the customers that we have. And so I kind of fit into both the using and defending side of the spectrum.
Jevon.
Okay, as the enterprise storage architect for SOCOM, my role typically is data protection, data management, availability, making sure that it's always there and safeguarded one way or another in order to apply these tools against that data, and also make the organization smarter about how they go about doing those things.
Miss Jackie.
It is on us. So I'm a software engineer, and our focus, we do a lot of user-client interfaces for the applications that we build. So one of our focuses is user research and how you use the application and make it UI and UX friendly, of how you intuitively how you use the system and make it very usable for people. And then on the back end for software engineering, we also focus on reliability of the infrastructure and the things that you're using. So looking at the logs and analysis, and so we use AWS, but any cloud environment that you have to kind of follow how your application is running and how you can improve the performance of the application.
Mr. Marcus.
So as an enterprise architect, you really got to, my role is to ensure that the approach is appropriate, right? So what are we trying to gain out of data science? We need to understand exactly what the customer is expecting. You want to understand how the enterprise capability is wanting to be leveraged. So if it really was something like, to keep it short, on what I would be doing, would be understand the environment, understand the customer and what they want, and strategize a holistic approach to what we want to gain out of data science.
Nick.
Thank you, Clinton. So as a cloud architect, we look at what cloud unique capabilities we can give you, but also the infrastructure. If you don't have the infrastructure to build the foundation for your data science program, you're really not going to get it off the ground, or you're just not going to move very fast. In order to innovate, you have to have cloud technology, either on-prem or in a public cloud provider.
And to you, Dr. Saba.
Good morning. So my role, I'm the Director of IT Planning, Engineering, and Innovation within the DoD space, specifically Special Operations. I have a unique challenge. We support an enterprise of 80,000 folks at hundreds of different locations. And so as we roll out technology, being a former Marine, I know what the challenges are of receiving technology capabilities at the distant end. And our role is to figure out how to deploy technology, the upgrades, the modernization, bringing in new innovations that help solve problems, specifically within the data science workspace, taking that data, figuring out how to analyze it, and then what to do with it from a business perspective. I also have the challenge of mentoring a team of about 70 different IT professionals and figuring out what they need before they actually need it, right? So as IT changes, we have to get ahead of that. We constantly go through kind of getting certifications, getting the training after the technology has already been deployed. So we can only get to technology to about 80%, and then we have that challenge of what do we do with the rest of the 20% and how to fix that.
So in your own words, what does data science mean to you? And how is it going to be able to improve your organization? I'll start with you, and I'll work my way back with you, Danny.
All right, so from a data science perspective, it's being able to take data from a multitude of sources, figuring out why that data exists, what do we do with that data, how do we process it, how do we manage it, and then most importantly, how do we communicate it. So from an IT perspective, I think we kind of focus on a bubble almost, where IT folks look at it from the IT perspective. Hey, we got this great technology, we can do all these great things with it, but what about the user? So the user needs to really be included in that discussion, and that's where the communication part comes into. So as we do our planning, we really got to have the right people in the room. They need to be able to have that voice so that we understand, what's the end goal. We often come up with dashboards, and a lot of the time it's because the customer doesn't understand what they want to see. They don't even know what the tool set can do for them. So we kind of have to generate, without spending a lot of time on it, a dashboard that we provide to our customer. Customer takes a look at it, figures out, all right, now I see that this tool has some great capabilities, but what if, and what can we do with it? And as we do that, we need to also bring in those users so that they can tell us what they want. So we're not spending too many cycles from a smart IT perspective, but we also need to focus on that user perspective as well.
What about you, Nick?
So it's an interesting question, because data science has been defined in so many different ways, but having a common lexicon building a data ontology, having a language that is commonly spoken across your enterprise, and making data actionable and meaningful. That's what data science means in my role. And in order to do that and facilitate it, again, what Dr. Sava said, is we have to make those tools available for them, for the data scientists and others. They don't have to strictly come from a data science background. It can be others from, well, anybody in your organization, and you give them access to some of those tools and capabilities, such as TensorFlow, such as RStudio and RShiny tools, all sorts of different kinds of infrastructure tools that you need to build in order to get after some of these narrow AI applications. I want to make clear that we're not trying to solve a general AI, we're not building a Jarvis. We're looking after unique use cases and niche that actually gives us an advantage on the battlefield. Jarvis will come later. Obviously, we don't have that capability right now. We don't have quantum computing that's widely available. But data science for cloud means making data actionable.
So with Marcus, with your responsibility, you're trying to put all this together on the enterprise. How is data science changing yours?
Yeah, you definitely hear a lot of interchangeable words, or those buzzwords like AI, machine learning, or ML with business intelligence and data science. And I really agree with the two here. Creating, understanding, the value of the data, being able to process it and getting value out of it is important, but also on top of that, you need to be able to visualize it. And a lot of times that's looked over. The quality of what we're producing with the data science is going to be key, because the leadership is going to be wanting to make decisions based off those. To be able to communicate the value clearly is going to be very important. But I want to add another thing to it, and with the AI thing is the ability to automate, right? So it's very important that we get the value out of it, but I really think that customers want to figure out how can they automate against it, because the IT engine is becoming very large. As IT systems become more complex, it needs more people and more time, and that's something that I think is a constraint for a lot of organizations.
With the previous three, they said visualization was a key component on this. And how is visualization in data science important, Ms. Jackie?
I guess it really helps to map and communicate to either your client or your customer or the business that you're in, so that you can see the trends and recognize the patterns more readily. So it just makes it very a consumable form of being able to understand and interpret the data.
And Jevon, with you responsible of essentially the data flows, how is data science important?
Skynet, the Terminators. So usually when you hear data science, AI, ML, that's the first thing that pops in my head. But usually as an engineer, you still think problem solution, process. So going from virtualization to cloud was a process. And it was same thing. We were still building requirements, identifying the problem, and giving a solution. So this is just a different process for how we get there to the end, right? So we're still doing a lot of the same things, but like you said, we're doing it more efficiently. And then we also have to go back to the business analyst side and say, hey, this is what it looks like, so that everybody understands it. And like Nick said, everybody's on the same page, they're speaking the same language. So from the infrastructure and the hardware perspective, you do have to be extremely careful on what you do and how you feel things, because not everything works with everything. So hey, we've felt our way through it, so we're getting there. But that's what I think of when I hear data science.
So, and that's actually a perfect transition, because for Sean, with the responsibility of securing the infrastructure, what is data science?
So I mean, at its core, and this has been mentioned, Marcus mentioned, is it's really about getting value out of the data. And so from a cybersecurity perspective, the value is to understand when people are trying to attack, penetrate, or somehow manipulate the environments that we have. And data science helps bring the scale that right now we can't do. One, we don't have enough cybersecurity analysts in the workforce to go and dedicate one to every 1 or 2 or 3 machines to just sit there and look at it and identify when bad things happen. We have to take a lot of the processes that they're going through in their head and try and turn that into something a machine can do, and then the machine can scale and leverage data science to apply those algorithms. So I can literally have a quasi-human-like behavior looking at every single host that's on the network. And that to me is where data science, then you can look at that from a visualization perspective, And you can go all the way down to trying to build your massive neural network, deep learning, runs on a 100-node compute cluster. It really, you pick the right hammer for the job, but at its core is to get the value from the data to achieve the objective.
So one of the things I noticed that all of y'all are looking at data science out of particular, from your point of view. Why is that? And this is probably some of the challenges that your senior leaders are having right now, is that each of y'all have a unique capability of looking at the problem set, but no one's defined that common lexicon. How is that? What do we need to do to be able to communicate to our senior leaders what the core fix actions are? Actually, I'll start off with Nick.
Oh, thank you, Clinton. So from the infrastructure and cloud perspective, we have to provide the foundational platforms for these artificial intelligence tools. Things such as containerization. We have to be able to scale data science applications. Once you build out that capability, how do you get it to your users? How do you get the data to the application? So a lot of that goes into the infrastructure side, getting the tools in place, getting the access for those who are authorized to use those tools, getting the ABAC and RBAC ironed out. And you really have to have a lot of stakeholder meetings with different groups across the enterprise, especially when you're talking about it in a enterprise setting, not just in a closed SUNNet location, right? We're not talking about a colo, we're talking about on-premise or in the cloud on your enterprise. So you could do some experimentation in a public cloud with some fake data or some learning data sets that are kind of modeled or similar to what you have in your maybe classified environments. And you can get folks to actually experiment with those across your enterprise in their spare time, and they may have spare time. If they got time to look at Facebook, right? They got time to work on TensorFlow. So that's what our CIO wants to get after, and that's what I want to provide for her and for everybody at SOCOM. So that we can get after some of these AI and ML applications. We don't know all the use cases, and we're looking for those cross-functional teams and different business areas, different, 6, the 3, the 2, the 1, all of them. You're talking intelligence, logistics, you're talking about budget, you're talking about manpower. AI and ML have applications across all of these, and some of them are cross-functionally related. You may not have that spare part, that missing piece of information in your particular field, but somebody else in another field has that. And if they have some understanding of how TensorFlow works or how these different models are built, then they can provide that missing link or that missing piece. And you can have a niche or a use case that you didn't even uncover. And finding those use cases is one of the first steps after getting the infrastructure in place. And in order to do that, you have to democratize the data, and you need to democratize the tools.
I agree. You don't build a house from the roof down, right? You start at a foundation. So if you start somewhere, if I wanted to use one word when it came to building up your first instance of any kind of business intelligence or this new technology that we want to do, which is gaining more information from our information, I think you need to start at the foundation. So be very specific. Start with one thing. Be very specific on what that scope is. Stick to that scope, and then build it up from there. Once you see the value out of it, then you pivot from that and go further.
So, Danny, from a business perspective, a lot of times the use cases are missing. How would you go about maturing those use cases and being able to bridge that gap between business and IT?
Well, I think the previous comments about foundational baselining is very important. We're looking at it from a tool perspective. What about from a definitions perspective, right? Within data science, you have big data, data warehousing, data analytics, and a plethora of other words that are out there. And what we experience within the DoD is that folks often take those words and they feel that they're interchangeable, right? So not having everyone on the team understanding exactly what we're trying to accomplish with those terms really hinders our progress. Folks often go off in different directions, and it really prevents timeliness of deployment of those tools, the technologies, being able to communicate on the same level. And that comes down to the communication, right? We've said that on a couple of different answers, that if your enterprise is not aware of what we're trying to do, what the strategy is, where we're going, and what those ideas mean, you can't really succeed out of that. We really need to get past just the IT portion. I'll say it again, from a stakeholder perspective that Nick commented on. We present IT And that IT can do a lot. And so when the Intel folks, when the HR folks see what that tool set can really do, it really gives out a lot of different ideas. And if you put the right people in the room, you can collaborate, you can bounce those ideas off of it. And one idea that might not be as mature, once you start collaborating within the different groups, it can really take off and help out the organization.
So I'll actually start off this question with you, Jevon. With data science gaining so much traction, how do you respond to your senior leaders on what the need let me correct myself, senior leaders for the need of data science? How do you guide your senior leaders? Because everybody's coming at it like, hey, I want to go buy a bright shiny tool. How do you kind of say, hey, pump your brakes, this is what we need to do?
Well, I try and communicate initially that it's a huge endeavor. Like you said, you're not building the roof of the house first. You have to start with design, not redesign. So a lot of people will try to recycle a lot of what they have already, be it personnel, other resources. Mm-hmm. So you communicate that first, let them know that it's a huge endeavor, but there's a lot of reward in it. So then you go back and you highlight the rewards of AI. So what am I going to gain from this? Be it efficiencies in approaches and processes and just accomplishments, getting things done as far as the organization's mission is concerned, be it a bank, DOD, health-wise, whatever the case may be. So when you start looking to apply these processes and the different tools are shiny, all that cool stuff, you know that it's a huge endeavor up front, but there's a really, really big payback on the end of it. And you have to mentally prepare your leaders for that, knowing that it's not going to be cheap, it's not going to be easy, but once you get your foot wet, the first cloud iteration probably sucked. But now, as they've gained traction, AWS, Azure, they're really good at offering that service, right? So your first step out is not going to be the best. But as you gain traction and you gain experience and maturity in doing it, you'll be a lot better at it and you'll be better for it.
What about you, Sean?
So I want to echo some of the same things. I think to help leadership is to really scope their problem. There are many different aspects to cybersecurity. I know you can take a look at applying data science to detecting threats on the inbound. You can look at, well, can I enrich my alerting that's happening? Can I cut through the noise of the alerting? Can I try and find the needle in the needle stack of something that got through that no one's found? You have different vendors and different manners of getting after all three and even more within that spectrum, but the question becomes, what's the return on investment? Where's the greatest weakness? You can't just chase the shiny tool. It's what makes the most sense for the business, and usually it's starting a little bit smaller and maturing into it. For many organizations, it isn't, I'm going to go build it from scratch myself. I probably don't have the right people to do so. It's going to be expensive. Maybe I look at just finding a vendor that provides something that's close enough for now as I build and kind of get used to it. And I think that there's a lot to it, but scoping it, maturing into it, and understanding where you're going to get the most bang for the buck is important.
So, Jackie, a lot of times senior leaders think their dashboard is their portal to AI, ML, and data science. How do you kind of help demystify that a little bit?
Not trying to make it so busy. So, and then going back to some of the things that were already stated, you really have to identify what your goals are and what you really want to get out of the problem that you're trying to solve. And so right now, what you see a lot of is data science is so vast and there's so much data and all this information trying to track down. People often try to have this like huge big box solution of we're going to solve all the things. So just echoing everyone else, like come up with your MVP, put that on your dashboard first, and make sure that the right people are seeing the right data. And unfortunately, really invest in your user research up front before you start doing the technical solving of the problem, and you'll get so much more value of what you're trying to do and what you're looking at and what your users are actually seeing, being that a client or your internal CEOs or managers and what they're trying to do. So they actually can see stuff and make good decisions based on what's being viewed and said. And then you do your iterations and say, okay, first, do your prioritization, get your user research out there, find out what are your real, follow people and what they're doing throughout their day, and really track down, like, what's the thing that you really need? All these other things sound good, but what's the minimum, like, that would get you to do your job the best? So once you start doing those things, put those things on the dashboard, and not like the plethora of like 1,000 things that you could be doing. Start with the first 5 or 10 things that can be developed soundly, more effective, that can be tested, and that will really help your senior leadership on the dashboard.
I think you actually hit a very key point, because a lot of times senior leaders are actually focusing on the wrong problem set.
Yeah.
And with the benefit of that user research and actually kind of focusing, maybe we'll be able to percolate some of the real problems that we need to focus on, or some of the problems that you want your senior leaders to actually focus on. So that user research is very, very critical, and sometimes simply that they always look at the solution, not the problem.
So Clinton, I'd like to take a quick second to kind of pivot it and look at it at a different angle. So instead of looking at it technically, I think that IT leadership plays a big role here in trying to shape the force into this new generation of computing. And why I say that is that we do have the people, like you said, like Jevon had said before, we're not creating something with new people. What we need to do is retool our force and use those people that we have, those SQL guys, those mathematicians that we have. We're going to use those people and show them how they can hone their skills to actually do MI and ML and AI and data science.
Don't get rid of your people.
Yes.
Don't get rid of your people.
We got great people, yeah.
Right.
So I think leadership does have a big role in shaping how we approach this technology.
So I'll kick this question to both you, Sean, and to Danny. You know, how do you mentor your professionals that are interested in going into this realm of data science? I'll go ahead and start with you, Sean.
I think part of it is just finding who they are. I know within the cybersecurity world, I look for the people who like to, it's almost the people who love to stare at the data. You'll have, within cybersecurity, we deal with a lot of data, and you have people that use it as much as needed, they get to the answer, and then they kind of stop. Then you have the people who like to leave no rock unturned. They want to understand exactly how adversaries were attempting, even if they were blocked, how they were attempting to get in, and just try and unravel it, try and look for that devil in the details. And they're the ones who are usually trying to find, if I looked at the data a little bit differently, maybe I could find them next time. And it wouldn't be a simple signature, but you're starting to put more reasoning and more algorithm kind of application to it. And as you find those, because each organization tends to have a few, I would say they are still in short supply, but you can then start to find out within your company, right? Do we have a data science, whether it's a job category, and then start to mentor them, get them in touch with people that are doing data science. Also look at potentially investing in them, because right now to go onto the street and hire someone from outside in, it's a costly endeavor. There isn't always a lot of commitment, whereas if you invest into your own, there is more commitment. You can hook them for longer. They tend to see the value that they bring. And I just think overall, a lot of this is going to have to be us growing our own. There's a lot of resources. It will take some money and some investment to get them into the right courses and the right education, but to take some of our top talent and just help them transition. It's a lot of what we did with the cybersecurity professionals about 8 to 10 years ago. Kind of new market, new kind of approach, and we needed some smart people to get after it. I think we're in the same position.
What about you, Danny?
So first, it's understanding what the people want. So as he said, understanding who they are, what they want to do. You have to figure out where they want to go, right? So a lot of times when you talk to professionals, they say, "Show me the money," and there's a lot more to it than that, right? Are you going to be happy in that role? Are you going to be satisfied? What are you going to do when you get there? What are you going to do with that capability? And then if we do invest in those people, often we throw money at a problem. But all that does is create a smarter person that then takes that and then elevates their career, right? So we have to figure out, as we throw money at that problem set, what do we do with that person? We need to have a clear strategy for our professionals, especially in the data science realm. In 2018, there was estimated to be about 1 million worldwide. And if you take a look at like the DoD workspace, we have folks, but we never have enough. And then the ones that we do have, because there's not too many of them, we take 50 different problems and we give it to the guy. So Jevon would be a great example as a storage architect, that anything that has to do with data and capacity, Jevon is now that person. And I think all of us as an IT professional have found that to be a problem, because if it has a plug and power, all of a sudden we're now that expert, right? So understanding the people, figuring out where they want to go, and then from a mentorship perspective for data science, there's some key areas: math, machine learning, computer science, domain expertise, statistical research, and then of course data processing. You have to have some experience in all of that. A lot of times folks will hear a buzzword, data warehousing, and they want to be the expert in that. So they go get 50 certifications in that one realm, but that doesn't transfer into the DoD workspace. So if they're trying to navigate into a higher career field, they basically got a lot of certs that show that they can take courses, that they're book smart, but it doesn't really get them anywhere in the future.
So actually, I'll pick on you a little bit, Marcus. With you were the responsible of actually managing the Microsoft SQL architects and the DB architects and the security architects and the data architects and the front-end developers. How do you mentor those folks to make sure that they're going into the right direction instead of their divergent paths?
Yeah, that's a good question. So playing a real good role with those people and making sure you understand their capabilities and make sure that you motivate them to do or they do what they should be doing is key. So what I mean by that is I have a passion for IT. I don't really have a passion for networking or SharePoint. I have a passion for making it all work together. So by trade, I was a network engineer. So I like to make things talk to other little things, right? So after I learned networking and I got basically to the top of my field and I hit that proverbial glass ceiling, it's like, okay, what can I do with this? How can I expand this? To be able to understand people's passions, maybe I want to do virtualization now, so now I want to see how I can make virtualization talk to networking, right? So I take SharePoint and web developers and say, okay, how can you make this dashboard better, right? And then that we're gonna pivot this to data science, for instance, right? Storage architects and data warehousers. How can you? Here's a problem set, right? These algorithms to make this stuff work can be very complex. You might have a problem that's really good at doing problem solving. So you put those things in there. You kind of spark the interest of your employees to make sure that they're still doing what they love, and that passion is going to keep them motivated.
So I know, Nick, that during the weekends that you play warrant officer for the U.S. Army, how do you take that from being able to lead the troops? How do you mentor the troops?
All right, so that's interesting because the Army has not really democratized the data. I'm not trying to get after them, but it would be great if they provide some tools. But for what I do, I'm in the Innovation Command now for the Army Reserve, so I look at a lot of different areas of innovation and technology. When I do have soldiers, which I do have some soldiers in this command as well, I try and focus them on finding those use cases, finding the interesting technologies that are going to get us ahead, not learning to catch up, but to get us ahead. In order to do that, they have to do a lot of learning themselves, and some of that self-study cannot, just be, hey, just read a book. The newest information out there is not in the books. You need to get on podcasts, you need to get on newsletters. The information's coming out faster than you can write a book. If you're reading a book from last year, you're already behind. You need to get on different newsletters, and you need to get in the right groups, meetup groups, whatever they are. They have these things, and meetup groups are great, actually. They have robotics leagues, they have maker labs. There's all sorts of data science and robotics type meetups, and to get engaged in your community and find those interesting areas and people that are doing things that are next level. Not, hey, I read about it in a book, let's start doing it. China's already beyond that. They're beyond us right now in democratizing their data and having tools available for the public to use. If we can give our public, or even our military folks, the ability to use some of these tools like Kubeflow, right, and train them and make it interesting, like AWS Deep Racer League, where they set up Racer League teams to actually go out and teach machine learning, machine vision with autonomous vehicles. You could form your own league and do a meetup group. I know they're forming up all over the world right now, and making it more interesting, make it more gamified, you don't have to be a mathematics expert. In fact, people don't like to learn mathematics unless there's a use case. I remember sitting in class myself and asking, when am I going to use this? And the teacher's staring blankly and going, I don't know, it depends on what you're going to do, right? Well, if you know what the use case is, you're going to seek out that data, you're going to be interested in learning it, and you're going to retain it. But you have to make it interesting, and so that's what I have to say.
So it's actually a good point, because that actually leads into the next question. So if you were the king or queen of the day, how would you influence your organization on the topic of data science? And I'll start with you, Sean.
So what I would do is try and get people to embrace it. I think at the leadership level, many leaders like it because they view, well, I can use it to drive down costs or expedite and automate. But when you move down the totem pole a little bit, you have people that naturally start to feel a bit of reservation. They start to worry whether their jobs may be on the line or whether there'll be reductions in force. And really, as we've heard earlier, there isn't a reason to fear data science, whether it's artificial intelligence or machine learning, is that it should help take away a lot of the tedious and mundane tasks that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And everyone knows we all have them. Try and have a machine do more of them and then allow you to leverage the gray matter that is what makes us unique and different from the machine to get after the next problem. We need someone to help teach the machine how to solve the next challenge. And so if we fear it, we're never going to get there. But if we can get people to embrace it, to accept it, and to run with it, I think the future looks incredibly bright. So that's what I'd focus on.
Jevon?
Almost the exact same answer. So it's making the decision to embrace it as the king for the day, right? And then moving forward from there, making sure that everybody understands it. If you're communicating and you have understanding, usually you get things accomplished a little bit quicker. And making sure that everybody knows that we're not getting rid of you, we're changing your path, your glide path, so to speak. So you put things in place so that people understand it. They're trained well on what needs to happen as the organization grows and changes, and you move forward from there. And you make a push, and you make the commitment up front that we're going to follow through with this soup to nuts. So we're going to do the complete.
So how do you make them value their data more?
That's a great question. You place emphasis on it from the top. So if the top of the organization is looking at, we have this data and capstone requirements come down like it has with the DoD, certain things need to be kept for a number of years and certain things need to be kept forever. We place emphasis on that and we manage it well. And once we manage it well, we can start parsing it out and begin to get products from it. Big data, right? So if we have actionable things coming from those products, those things are what's seen. And the organization sees actionable products being produced and we're acting on them and we're becoming more efficient and our processes are improving, it helps the train move.
Miss Jackie?
I like this question. So I would challenge the company internally to use data science. Like, how do you perform better as a company? Because once you really internalize it as a company as a whole, from the top to the bottom, even your HR, your hiring practices, how you pay your employees, how you get more efficient at delivering software, like where your pain points are, and looking internally, you can deliver better to your customer because it's more of your culture versus you're just trying to shape this data science stuff and sell it to someone else. But when you actually practice it internally, I find it very valuable because it's actually something that you believe in and you're trying to remove bias out of things. And the other thing I would add, and it kind of goes back to the mentorship, is look outside of what you call tech or IT or what you see as defensive cyber DoD stuff, and look at some case studies. Data science isn't new, so like I was just telling a friend yesterday, you can look at like a Walmart or a Cheesecake Factory and how they use data science to run their business, and it's pretty amazing how accurate their numbers are and how they're able to pivot based on the information that they're receiving. And so, and it's not new at all in that industry or for them. So how do you apply that to what you're doing? And so maybe make it something more relatable, and then people can start to envision what it could possibly mean or be for them.
I think you said a good word there, which was changing a culture. So changing the culture to a creative mindset is going to be a big deal for an organization that's going to be successful in doing this. Leadership is the foundation from which direction and vision is going to come from. I actually see my colonel in the crowd for two bases, Keesler and Yokota, right? So we look to those leaders as where we're going. Get that vision down, right? I think we need to start with leadership and then we end with the technologists. So it's not that technologist is not smart and doesn't know how to do what they need to do. It's really how do we lead them to make sure that they ensure that they understand where they need to go. I think that's going to light the pathway for the technologists, and I think that's going to drive our professionals.
Nick?
Oh, if I could be CTO or CIO for the day? All right, so it's a good question. There's a lot of things I would do. The first is identify a platform that I can actually democratize the data. Again, I keep going back to this. You have to democratize the tools and the data. If you don't give them the access, they're just reading a book, they're getting interested, and they can't do anything with it, right? And if you're worried about your sensitive data, look, you're not doing your training on your sensitive data. You should not be doing your training on your actual data at this point. You should be doing your training on test data that is representative of your actual data. And for that, you can do public cloud, right? You can give them those tools and give them the access to those cloud unique capabilities, and you don't have to worry about, oh, my CISO's never going to approve this or whatever. You can test it out in the public cloud, know exactly what hardware and tools you need because you've democratized it, you've given them the tools they need and allow them to come up with those use cases. Because you say, what do I get to use data science for? Dashboards? Okay, great, cool. We've been doing that for a while. No, we want to use data science for so much more. Machine vision, we're talking about natural language translation, you're talking about IoT, you're talking about federating the data and finding out meaningful insights that you didn't know, the questions you didn't know to ask. And you can't do that if you don't democratize the data. I like to say this, you don't innovate inside of a SCIF because SCIFs are built as delineators between ideas and information. There is no amalgamation of data that's happening or ideas that are happening between SCIFs. One guy in one SCIF can have more information than you have in another, and you'll never know that. You could be 5 feet away from them on the other side of the wall, and they could be using tools you didn't even know the enterprise had. So you have to democratize the tools. And I see it constantly where one group has one thing and another doesn't have it. Why can't we just give them these tool sets and not give it the classified information that it needs? You don't need to classify the tool. The tool is not classified. Neither should the data that you're testing it on. And one other point is, don't buy your hardware before you know what you need. If you over-provision and then you underutilize, it does not look good for return on investment. How do you know what you need? You test it in a public cloud. Then you take those metrics, and every cloud provider has them, and so do the hardware vendors. You say, how many vCPUs am I using in Azure, AWS, or Google, right? You can actually look at their calculators and say, well, I use this many GPUs or TensorFlow units, right? So I know exactly how many NVIDIA processors I need to buy, or GPU processors I need to buy, or Tensor processors I need to buy based on my demand signals that I got when I democratize the tools and the data in a public cloud. If you go out and you buy a whole bunch of tools and a whole bunch of hardware equipment, and then you underutilize it, you're constantly fighting people to use it instead of knowing what you need up front. Because people don't want to get on board. You want to move from fear, uncertainty, and doubt to a fear of missing out. You are not going to be moving forward. You're going to fall behind. And if you don't allow them to see that understanding and give them access to the tools, you're never going to foster the data science community that you need.
And finally you, Dr. Sava.
I think for me, it's putting out the fires versus some big changes. So we often see a problem, maybe a logging tool's not working or some type of software that's doing the analytics. And we'll have our O&M staff that sit there for hundreds of hours trying to solve a problem over and over and over again. And really what it is a psychological issue where folks don't want to take a step back because they feel that work's going to pile up and then they're going to be behind and then upper leadership is going to take that as a negative. Sometimes you have to take that step back and focus on fixing the bigger issue, which is actually going to solve all those smaller problems and give you more time to focus on some of the key critical areas. Another one is better partnerships with vendor companies. So I think that vendors often come in and they have a great tool, they have a great product for us, but we don't often know how to use it. And with technology and the way that it changes, it's impossible with companies providing tuition assistance, within the DoD workspace. You can't take that money and actually get ahead of a problem, right? So I think it needs to be a shared responsibility. While you invest in your people from a company perspective, the vendors also have to come out and help you get trained on that equipment. And we've worked with some great folks. We're doing some data projects within my space, and the vendors are very supportive, right? They put people out with the equipment, they train us, they teach us how to use it, they teach us what the capabilities are, how it works, and really what we can do with it. And from our perspective, I can then take that back to the customer and say, hey, look at this great tool, look at what it does, and look at what we've done for you, within a lab perspective, and it really goes a lot further from a selling perspective if you show that the vendor is on sport with you and not just trying to make that dollar.
So panel, thank you for your insights. At this time frame, I would actually like to turn it over to the audience. What questions do you have for our panelists that you want them to answer for you? First person gets up, I'll get you a water bottle. If not, I'm going to start asking questions. I'll ask questions to you. And actually, General Shea, on this particular problem set, what would you want? How do you see this data science problem set?
I'm concerned about the veracity and the quality of the data that you're using and the sourcing of the data.
So actually, I'll kick that over to Marcus, because you're controlling a lot of the data flows. How do you handle that?
That's a valid concern. Right now, I'm running an innovation project with an organization talking about data hygiene, and that's something that we and the DoD doesn't do very well, right? So we want to keep everything forever, and every year our velocity on how much data we're ingesting is just tripling and then quadrupling, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So I really do think that an approach to figuring out what data we have, what's important, what's not, tier that data, move that data out, and get some data governance in order so the leadership's policies on what we do with data and how we're going to use that data is going to play a big role on what the output of this engine is going to be.
I would like to add to that, if I may. So I think you're absolutely right, Marcus. On an enterprise perspective, you're talking about the data that the organization already owns. Yes, we absolutely need to focus on data hygiene. But when we're talking about the tactical layer, we're talking about deception, we're talking about data that is not necessarily the cleanest data. It's dirty, it's dingy, it's small, right? We've heard all these terms from Dr. Cott and others that are on the leading edge of some of this stuff. How do you get after looking at the data and knowing what is quality data, what is misleading data or misinformation? It's going to be difficult, and you're going to need machine learning bots. But you need to build those bots by, first training them what looks right, because all of us do this. When we're trained on something, we have to know what right looks like. If we train a data model on what right looks like, it can add a quality filter and it can add a level of confidence, right? And we talk about confidence levels when we're talking about statistics. Well, you have to apply machine learning statistics to that data. You have to have good data sets that hey, this is what right looks like, and then anything outside of that is going to get a lower threshold on that CI value, right? So in order to do that on the tactical layer, I think, one, you need to have the right sensors. Two, you got to have the right data models. You need to train in synthetic environments that replicate what the actual environments that your tactical operators or users are going to be in. And in order for the AI to complement that operator or person who's actually working with the data, right? If they're not complementary in that environment, and we're not talking about video games, we're talking about more of a virtual reality, augmented reality type synthetic training environment where you can work on those dependency issues, where the augmentation is working right, and also the operator knows what to expect from the machine learning algorithms. I think from a tactical perspective, it's a more difficult question. I think enterprise-wise, we can get after it with right hygiene, ontology, by rating the data quality, and then coming up with what we value on the data. We don't value our data enough. I don't think anybody in the DoD assigns a dollar value to the data, but everybody in the commercial sector does. How do you know, if you don't ask your data owners, what is the value of this data? Now, can we put dollar values on it? I think it's difficult to do from the DoD perspective. We can put values in different ways, such as how fast can I get after an answer? Is this actionable right now? Is this usable now? So we have to create other metrics besides dollar values. But we do need to measure our data on the veracity, how fast we can accept the data, and then also what do we need to keep? We don't need to keep it all.
So I want to give an opportunity for another question.
So this is more for cybersecurity, but since we're talking about the automation and culmination of information, how do we validate that that's not going to create spillage, as in the culmination of information will then produce a higher level classification on a lower level network times? How do we identify what that information is? How do we automate that capability? And how do we remediate?
It's a good question. I would say that I don't know if that's a problem that data science creates. I think that's one that we're right now battling with when you take the massive quantities of data coming from different enclaves, and even though it's unclassified, and you're putting it onto one location and trying to derive value from it. I think that's naturally going to be something that's going to become a challenge. I know the natural gut inkling that most people are going to have within their duty is just pump it up, pump all the data up, and then start doing analysis at a higher classification level. That may be the answer in some instances. I would be hesitant to say that should be the de facto answer. I think that if there are certain types of, whether they be algorithms or applications of what you're doing to the data that may produce something that someone would consider an outcome that's classified, as we figure a way to get the data into the right place and to do it in the right location. But at the grander scale, I would say try and keep as much as you can at the unclassified level that should be, and then do what you need to that's at the classified level. Hopefully I'm not speaking too much roundabout. I think it gets into a little bit of the eaches with each particular instance, but I know it's been a concern. I mean, JRSS came, and then you talk, well, JRSS data plus endpoint data plus internet access point data plus host data. I mean, when you put it all together, what happens? And I haven't seen a decision made either way, so it's still unclassified at this point, but I think that more and more data coming from more and more locations, it may push us the other way until we actually bump it up.
If I may, I'd like to jump in on this too. I actually have an opinion on this, like pretty much everything. But I would say that if you're going to pull a lot of data in, you're going to need to put attribute-based tags on that data. You need to tag your data. You're going to need to have an ontology. And who decides that? You know, maybe that's your CDO, maybe that's your CIO. I don't know. But once you do that, you're going to have a cross-domain solution if you're going to continue to have separate networks instead of one large network that's based on masking and tagging data, which is, I know, what the DoD is trying to get after. It's a little ways out there, but while we have these separate enclaves and we're not all on MPE, right, we're going to have this issue, and we're going to have cross-domain solutions to push it higher if this tag and this tag and this tag. So I think the future is we need to look at building an equation after we build the ontology. Once that equation hits an equal sign, it goes up to the next level through a cross-domain solution.
I think we have time for, I'm finding this mic, I apologize. I got one more question from the audience.
Hi, thank you for your presentation today in panel. My name is Maxim Volodin. I'm from Maxisoft Corporation. And my question is kind of simple and not at the same time. How do you find a role of data scientists when you place an ad at whatever? Because what I'm getting at, that multiple different organizations use this kind of as a buzzword. And from my perspective, I came from business intelligence world for like long time ago. It's one definition. Some government agencies, they say, well, we need data scientists. What do you want the person to know? Or where's the boundaries between data scientists and security analysts? Where's there basically data architect difference between data architect and data scientist? Is it a person who's a crazy mathematician who does only with numbers, or a person who did with data quality, for example? I just want to have a different definitions for you, because it's more serious than people think, because they call it,
well,
different.
Actually, and I'll pick on this a little bit myself, because this is one of those, this is my soapbox on that one, right? If you look at Google, Microsoft, AWS, Facebook, and all that stuff, they're actually pulling away from the traditional computer science or the mathematicians. If you're looking at someone with a psychology major or underwater basking and weaving, they're, I'll play a little bit of words, they're looking for that diversity of thoughts. But they have to have that foundational understanding of what statistics are, and being able to, but they already know how to do their research. They know how to develop something around a use case. So as they gather in that data, they're putting their own thought process on that, and they're sharing it to an audience of other professionals, and they're helping shape down that solution. So go look at, there's actually, I forgot what the reference is, but Facebook is not hiring Stanford science grads. They're looking for psychology. They're looking for psych majors. They're looking for economics majors, because you need those different opinions in that room to be able to even satisfy the ethics of the data itself. So I know that we're coming close. Actually, I'll turn it over to the panel if there was anything else that y'all wanted to add on to that.
So I would just say, I think it's a little bit challenging sometimes to do the hiring for this, but because most of the teams that you have, it's an interdisciplinary team, right? If I want to go and do something data science for cybersecurity, I'm probably going to need a programmer, someone to do my front end. I'm going to need someone who understands algorithms, right, and is more the science guy. And I'm going to need a cybersecurity SME that can help make sure that the other people understand what they're really trying to achieve and the objective. And he's probably the use case owner and helping to drive that team and ensure success. So you can't do it with just one person, which is why I think to Clinton's point, it's, right, Facebook, what does psychology have to do with Facebook? Well, a lot when you take a look at interconnections between people, right? They need to go and get someone who has that expertise and then bring them into the data science realm. And if you can get people that are kind of that crossbreed where they have some data science experience and they're more of an expert in a different area, then those, I would say, are some of the highest demand, because then you can take them and plug them into different teams. But yeah, I mean, the challenge sometimes is what words do you put on that when you put it out to try and get those people. So I agree, but I think that's what's really driving it.
Ms. Tina, I'd like to turn the stage over to you.
Hey, let's give a round of applause for this panel. Wasn't that wonderful? I want to thank all the panelists with us today, and I want to thank Clinton, Austin, and also Rachel McLean from JJR Solutions for putting together this panel. I know you pick panelists for their expertise, but you never know when you bring them together how it's going to gel together as a panel. And I think that they really, the different focus and the way they interacted and played off each other, I thought was really outstanding. So congratulations for putting together a wonderful panel, and thank you very much. Thank you to Hayden and Walker and Associates for sponsoring the Cyber Education Theater. We're now going to break from this group. You have a full agenda today, and I'd like to invite you all back here at 1:30 today, because we have a Women in Cyber panel here in the theater that's going to be outstanding, followed by at 4:30, Susan, is it 4:30? 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock is a Women in AFCEA reception up in the Sharp Street lobby. And you don't have to be a woman to attend either one. It gives you a perspective of cyber from a women's viewpoint. And then the reception is a great way to interact with the panelists and network. So see you back here at 1:30. Have a great day. Thank you again, Clinton, and to our panelists. Thank you.